So we do have Liz Veazey here with us. She is our Policy and Rural Energy Director. We have Lisa with us, who is a solar homeowner and advocate who is representing in Idaho. And then my name is Sarah Solomon. I am the Director of Community Impact at Solar United Neighbors. First, I'd like to start with our theory of change. We as Solar United Neighbors are a 501c3 nonprofit. Our theory of change is to help folks go solar. Our main mechanism for doing that is through our solar co-ops, where we get neighborhoods together and do basically, group buy programs. But we also have our free Go Solar help desk, where we can look at proposals, answer questions, and kind of help you with anything that you might need. Our next step in theory of change is to join together. So, we really focus on that community aspect of bringing people together so that we can all kind of move towards this general direction of fighting for our energy rights. And so that's kind of what we're here to focus on today, is that, fighting for our energy rights and really learning how to become an effective solar advocate. So what is citizen lobbying? The general term kind of sometimes carries some negative connotation with, big corporations or monopolies, but some folks don't know that there actually is this other section of lobbying, which is citizen lobbying, which is what we're here to learn about today. So lobbying is communicating with decision makers or elected representatives to influence their position on an issue, right? So basically, we are talking to the people who have the power to give us what we want about giving us what we want. And when it does come to advocating for the things you believe in, there are kind of levels to what has been proven to be most effective and least effective. So in this pyramid of engagement here, you can kind of see at the bottom, there's collectivism or mass online action. I'm by no means saying that this is not an effective way to engage with your elected officials, but this is going to kind of have a lower impact than some of these others. Kind of an adjacent form of lobbying, so to speak, is social media tagging. So, if you're on X or if you're on a social media platform and there's an issue that's important to you, tagging your representatives does get their attention. It does let them know that there's, community interest in an issue. Next step up on the ladder is personal emails or letters. And that's not sending a petition or that one-click collectivism like I mentioned before. That's handwriting out a letter, handwriting out a personal email that you're sending to a representative that is, sharing your personal story about why the issue is important to you. You'll also see LTE there, which is a letter to the editor. This is another extremely effective way to get the attention of decision makers. Basically what a letter to the editor is if, say, an article comes out in your local newspaper that is anti-solar or maybe misrepresents or miscategorizes solar, you can respond to that article by responding directly to that news outlet with your own personal experience. And it's especially effective when you are able to call out the individual that you're trying to get the attention of. So say, for example, you have someone in office that you want to get the attention of. If you put their name in that letter to the editor and it gets published, their staff members are going to see it. They're going to take note of it. They're going to let the legislator know. So that's definitely higher up on the chain. Next up, we have personal phone calls. So, dialing in and actually having a conversation, whether it be the elected official themselves or whether it be one of their staff members. These things are recorded and tend to have a higher impact with that one-on-one touch. Next up, the ladder of engagement is testifying at the legislator. So obviously, sitting through a few hours of testimony and the proceedings, that shows a high level of interest and does give you an opportunity for you to have a few moments on the floor to share what it is that you're there to share. I'm asking for you to support pro-solar policies, right? And then at the very top, which is what we're all here to learn about today, is an in-person meeting, or AKA lobbying. Lobbying is just kind of a fancy word, but really what it is, you're just meeting another person, you're meeting with another human being to talk about the issues that are important to you and to share your personal story. So I've got experts in their field here with us today. So they're going to be going more in depth into this, but just to share what we're going to cover, we will go over research and preparation. So the things you need to kind of dig into before you prepare for your meeting, what you need to do that can kind of help you avoid any hiccups during the meeting, and then getting community to join you. So, you know, having a few bodies in the room that are all there to support the same interest tends to have a higher impact, and it also allows you to focus on the meeting and they can kind of take notes. We'll teach you how to schedule the meeting and then kind of the cadence of what a meeting could look like. And then we'll share with you best practices for meeting follow-up. So, and then at the end, we will have a Q&A. So if you do have your questions, like I said, go ahead and put them in the Q&A. Just in case folks are wondering, we will be sending out a recording of this tomorrow. So you will, you know, don't feel like you need to take notes or anything. We'll be sending out the presentation as well as the recording and some resources for you tomorrow. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Liz Veazey, and she is going to take us away.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. I guess I'll start with a quick intro. So I'm Liz Veazey, Policy and Rural Energy Director at Solar United Neighbors, or just Sun. I support our solar policy work in the Atlantic Southeast region. So that includes Virginia, DC, Maryland, Florida, and Puerto Rico, along with some national initiatives, including some work around rural electric co-ops. And I've been working on clean energy in some way or another for more than 20 years, since I was a college student working for solar on my college campus at UNC Chapel Hill. I live in Nebraska, where it's so cold that it has been so cold until I guess today that my 3 chickens have mostly stopped going out of their coop, and I've been taking them food and water. But it warmed up today, so that was nice. But yeah, I'm going to walk through sort of the steps of lobbying. And all of this is more in depth in our lobbying guide, which I'm sure my colleagues will put in the chat at some point. But yeah, so starting off, definitely recommend learning about your elected official, thinking about how you could connect with them. Could you connect with them around where they went to school, organizational affiliations, past work they've done in the community, and or votes they've taken? Could you find stats or information about your issues that connect with messaging or framing that they use and or commitments that they have made in their campaign? So for example, if they have talked about economic development and jobs as being really important, then if I was meeting with a Florida representative, I would talk about the $18 billion of annual contribution to Florida's economy and more than 40,000 jobs supported by rooftop solar. You know, do they talk about freedom? You could connect to the freedom to generate your own electricity and reduce your reliance on a monopoly utility. But really thinking about like how you could connect with them, I think can be really helpful to sort of build that relationship, which is one of the best things sort of in the longer term. So you'll also need to think about what you want to ask them for, if it's supporting a bill or opposing a bill or something else, and like what do you want to get out of the meeting. You may just want to build a relationship. I think building the relationship is definitely an important part of any meeting. So you want to try to get to know them some, connect with them around the importance of rooftop solar. At Sun, we work to do that in Florida. Recently, we scheduled a series of meetings with state legislative offices, and we shared Florida rooftop solar stats, like some of the ones I just mentioned. We had solar homeowners share stories, and we talked about the importance of rooftop solar and net metering in Florida. And that was sort of a good way for us to start building relationships with the offices. All right, next slide. So here's an, example of a sample agenda. I think it's really helpful to draft an agenda to help guide your meeting. The slide outlines, I think a relatively good one, including sort of introductions, thanking the official for something, and or, connecting with them, connecting back, thinking about the research you did, and how you can connect with them. I think personal stories are really important. They may fit in as part of the introductions and or part of like why the bill or the issue is really important to you. Stories are things that the official will be more likely to remember and can be really helpful and powerful. So one example of that, in West Virginia, Sun was able to set up a meeting with some of Senator Manchin's team, and was able to recruit a rural small business owner with J.Q. Dickinson Saltworks, who had received a Rural Energy for America program, or REAP grant. So that small business person was able to tell their story of the REAP grant helping them go solar and save money, and better invest in their business and help them have a more vibrant, stronger business. So that was a really helpful story from someone in, the senator's district in West Virginia. So basically, anyone in the state of West Virginia, but could really help get across the importance of that program. And I think, as many of you may know, Senator Manchin eventually voted for the Inflation Reduction Act, which expanded the funds available for REAP grants for agricultural and rural small businesses. So my colleagues, if they haven't already, can share a link to Sun's REAP guide, which has a lot of great information about how agricultural and rural small businesses can access those grants. But I think, that story is about the importance of those stories and really getting across, your message in stories if you can, and how that can be really powerful. Make sure to include a clear ask is part of our recommendation for the agenda. So for example, will the senator protect my right to produce my own power and lower my energy bills and oppose HB 741? That was a bill that would have ended net metering that we fought in Florida. It passed the House and the Senate, but was eventually vetoed by Governor DeSantis. So that was a big victory for us, and we haven't seen that come back in the legislative session of 2023, and we don't think it's likely this year. It may come back in 2025, but part of that is because of the legislators have, we've heard them say they don't want a food fight. Because we put up a really strong fight, they don't want to have to deal with us putting up a fight again and bothering them again. So yeah, it can really make a difference if a lot of people reach out. And the governor has also said they received a lot of love from people around that bill. And that's part of the reason I think we're not seeing it come back. So really powerful campaign there. But anyways, just about making a clear ask. So figure out what that is in your case. The agenda recommends listening to their questions and concerns and answering, thanking them. So I think that's a pretty good overview. So we can move on. Next, oh, okay. So next up, invite others to join. So it's not necessary, but it can be really helpful to have multiple constituents of the official join the meeting and bring different perspectives and show support for the issue. And Sun may be able to help you find people to join a meeting if you want to have a meeting about solar with one of your officials. So feel free to reach out to us. I think my colleagues will probably put it in the chat, but you can reach our policy and advocacy team at advocacy@solarunitedneighbors.org. And yeah, I've found meetings of like 2 to 5 to be a good size, and often helpful to have a couple people to talk about things from, different perspectives. All right, next. All right, step 3. To schedule the meeting, you'll have to find your elected officials' contact info. So we have set up a handy little tool that you can use to find your elected officials' contact info. So you should check that out. And I think it should be in the chat. Great. Okay. So once you have that contact info for the elected official you want to reach out to, you'll need to reach out and ask to schedule a meeting, provide some times, ideally that you and others are available as a starting point. It's good to provide context about, why you want to meet in a few sentences. It's good to always ask to meet with the elected official. But, often particularly with like federal representatives and sometimes often with state representatives, you may only be able to meet with one of their staffers, but, meeting with staffers is great. The staffers are generally pretty knowledgeable. They, often do a ton of work and, are the people you would be in touch with potentially about drafting or refining legislation. So it's great to meet with them and build relationships with them. So, I think I added, I guess my addition here didn't get transferred over, but I wanted to add be persistent to this slide, as I've had to email, 2 or 3 or sometimes more times elected officials or their staffers to set up lobby meetings. So, one example is that I emailed one office 3 times spread out over the course of a whole month, and I never heard anything back. I thought they just ignored my emails, but something came up related to solar policy about a month later, and they actually reached out to me to ask about it and to ask what I thought about it. So I was surprised by that, but definitely keep trying to reach out and realize that you might be building a connection even if they don't respond. But hopefully you will get a response and set up a meeting. I was able to set up meetings with everyone else that I reached out to at that time. Okay, next slide. So step 4, attending the meeting. So we already sort of talked through having an agenda. So it's helpful to use that as a guide. I think sometimes I've created agendas for these meetings and sometimes, we don't necessarily stick to them, but I think if it feels like you're having good conversation and you're connecting with the office and you're like connecting around your issue, then it may be okay to just sort of go with the flow. But you can see how that goes. And what else? I think if you have a couple people, it can be helpful to have somebody taking notes, someone facilitating, and someone responsible for making the ask. But if it is just you, you'll have to make do and do those things yourself, which I think is manageable usually. And it's definitely okay if you can't answer all of their questions. Just make sure to take notes and follow up with information afterwards. And if it's solar policy related, Sun could definitely help you respond. So feel free to reach out to us. And yeah, I think this slide also sort of talks about semi-formal or formal attire. I think that, is good, but is not 100% necessary. But it's nice to, show that you're respecting them and dressing up. Next slide. All right. So more on attending the meeting and thinking about responding to the official's position. So if the official opposes or is undecided or maybe doesn't want to make a commitment right then, it's always good to be respectful, show that you're disappointed, but then, ask what they need in order to reconsider their position. So take note of that and include, try to include information in your follow-up to address that if you can. And if the official supports your ask, you can, thank them and, you can reiterate or tell them about how their support, how important it is and how it can, it'll positively impact you and your community. So, for instance, you could say, thank you so much for your support for this bill. This bill will help stabilize my family and many others' energy costs and help drive local economic development. So we really appreciate your support. And, then you could follow up and ask them to, you could potentially ask them to, can they get co-sponsors or could they get other legislators signed on? Or that could come later in your follow-up. Next slide. All right, and we are getting towards the end of the steps. So the last step, step 5, after the meeting, follow-up is really important to really help keep building that relationship. So look over your notes and, research any questions you didn't know the answer to. Feel free to reach out to Sun or other groups for help in responding if you need that. Draft a follow-up thanking them for the meeting. Try to answer any of their questions that you maybe weren't able to answer during the meeting. Include any relevant resources or fact sheets or materials. Sun has some great fact sheets for some of our states that I think we can share in follow-up. If they're a supporter and they support the position you want them to, you can, I guess, as I mentioned before, you could ask them to encourage their colleagues to support the bill. If they're undecided or they wouldn't commit, you could remind them about the potential impact that their support or supporting your position could have. Yeah, and so good follow-up really helps demonstrate you're a resource on solar or energy or whatever the issue is that you're meeting with them about. They may be more likely to reach out in the future. So really important to follow up and just keep building that connection and relationship. And I guess another sort of lobbying related story, in Maryland, one of our supporters had reached out to us and had reached out to their legislator about like an issue going solar, I think with like a common area of their homeowners association or condo association. And the legislator was really open to working with us and with the their constituent to draft legislation on a fix. So you know, you never know what could come out of just reaching out, talking to your legislator about challenges or stories about going solar, and needs for policy change. So it's always good to reach out and tell those stories and build those connections. Yeah, and I think that is about it from me for now. And this is all outlined in our Solar Advocate Citizen Lobbying Guide that hopefully was put in the chat at some point. And so there's more information and resources and notes in that guide, but it includes all of the information basically that we've covered. So that's a really great resource, and encourage folks to check that out. And I'm excited to get to your questions, but first I'm going to pass it to Lisa to introduce herself.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Awesome. Okay. Well, you can see what my background is, basically electrical and computer engineering back when the earth was still cooling. And now that it's been heating up, we got to get more solar on our roofs. I live in Idaho, which is in the Northwest. We're just one state in from the West Coast, from Washington and Oregon. We just got about 20 inches of snow this last week. And I put solar on my house, on my rooftop in 2016 through a program called Solarize the Valley, where we got about 50 homeowners together, and found some qualified installers and said, we'll give you a bunch of volume if you'll cut us a deal. And so I was the first person to put solar on my roof. But I'm going to talk about, so then I had to protect, protect the value of that. So I'm going to talk about three experiences that I've had with working with legislators and providing testimony. So the first was with the Idaho Public Utilities Commission on solar net metering cases, and the net metering compensation. The second is with the Idaho State Legislature regarding rooftop solar and roadways and cycling. And the third one is with our Idaho members of Congress. There are 4, and I have met with 3 of them in person, in their offices in DC or in Boise when they were home from, Congress, and one of them via Zoom. So, and I want to back up some of the things that Liz said, because they were just right on. So before the Idaho Public Utilities Commission, or the PUC, our local Idaho Power Utility wanted to change the net metering rates and give us like 1/4, back of what, like when we generate excess energy that goes on the grid, they wanted to give us like 1/4 or less of that back, when of what we generate. So we had a number of cases. And what happened is the local environmental groups banded together, and that's how I really first heard about the case. And they put on workshops regarding testimony and how to testify, just like you've just heard here. So I got help from both local and national groups. So I'm a member of Citizens Climate Lobby, the Union of Concerned Scientists, and all the local environmental groups, and SUN and Vote Solar, and a whole bunch. So all the environmental groups got together. We talked about the testimony, how we were going to do that. And then we divided up the talking points. And I said, these are the things that I can talk about where I'll actually have some credibility. So I pick usually no more than 3 talking points that are really strong, my very strongest points. And then I talk about those. And we decided to wear yellow when we were giving our testimony, or just sitting in the room getting ready to testify, so that the PUC commissioners could look out in the audience and say, wow, there's a lot of yellow out there. A lot of folks clearly are here to provide their support. And I read the actual proposal that Idaho Power had submitted, the actual case. And I said, now, which of these parts matter the most? So I really came prepared. So they knew that I had done my homework. And then another important thing is I said, you know, who am I? Who is it that's speaking to you, and what is my viewpoint? And I said, well, I'm an Idaho Power customer. I'm an Idaho Power shareholder because they're an investor-owned utility. I'm an electrical and computer engineer, so I know a little bit about that, you know. And I'm a mother of two who cares about climate change and the kind of world that our children will inherit. Um, and lastly, I'll say that one of the things that was really powerful is that there was a variety of viewpoints of people and how this would affect them. So like retirees who said, I put a lot of my money into this solar system, you know, so that I could know that my bills, you know, they'd be constant, they wouldn't rise, and I could control, you know, my utility costs. So all of those things together were very powerful. And ultimately, we did end up with a much better ruling from the PUC than what was originally proposed by the utility. So that's the PUC experience. And then before the Idaho legislature, there was a proposal. So some of the HOAs, the housing associations here, did not allow people to put rooftop solar on. And so the legislation was to ban that, to say you can't ban that. You can make some rules about it, but you can't outright ban it. So the topic really was whether they could ban it on rooftops. And one legislator asked, why is this law needed, right? So that was the thing that we had to show, where people, you know, needed or wanted or should be able to put this in the rooftops, and why they couldn't, and what harm that was doing. So it's really important to understand what the question is. And in the end, the law was passed. There were some, you know, there were some boundaries on it. This house had to be within 90 degrees of south facing and so forth. And the local utility, you know, got their hand in on the game. But basically, you know, it enabled a lot of people who previously could not put solar on their roof to put it on the roof. So we override some of the homeowner association barriers to rooftop solar. Lastly, through Citizens Climate Lobby and through Union of Concerned Scientists, and also through the Idaho Clean Tech Association, of which I'm a board member, I've met with my members of Congress, both, like I said, both in DC and here in Boise. And I want to say that Citizens Climate Lobby also has phenomenal tips on lobbying, and they're pretty close to what you saw here today. Really connect with your representative, and start with a thank you. Always start with gratitude for them taking the time to meet with you. That's really big. And they also mention, you know, listen more than you talk, hear what their concerns are, know what they care about. So calling, emailing, writing, submitting written, in-person testimony are all good. And I always write up my testimony before speaking, and then I also submit it as written testimony or follow-up. So that'll kind of do double duty for you. And then I'll talk about, with the Idaho Clean Tech Alliance, this was kind of exciting. We arranged a meeting with one of our Idaho members of Congress, and that member invited representatives of all the other members of Congress. And I think it's because we were businesses who might bring in jobs, we might bring in money, and maybe they were thinking, hey, maybe these guys will contribute to my campaign. But, you know, also you've got to take into account the politics. So in Idaho is a very red state, although there are bluer areas in some of the cities like Boise, Sun Valley, and Moscow, Idaho, Pocatello. But the common denominators that everybody seems to care about are health and jobs and income. We can also frame our arguments in terms of freedom and libertarian values. Our Republican governor talks about energy sovereignty, right? So like, you know, I'm in charge of my energy and I've got energy freedom. So the motto there is frame the message to resonate with local values. So why does it matter? Well, you'll have a lot more influence meeting in person, you know, than via email and phone. They're making the time to see you and see your face and connect as humans. So do that and thank them for their time because these guys have a lot going on. They also need to know how their legislation impacts their constituents. So give them that perspective and remember that they want to get reelected. Let me see. I think that's mostly it. And citizen lobbying matters because, for example, the Public Utility Commission is charged with protecting citizens from monopolies, and they don't want major bad publicity due to perceptions of unfairness or regulatory capture. Again, often citizen testimony helps them to understand the impact that a given proposal will actually have on citizens that will be burdensome or unfair. And that's what the PUC is charged with. So one other thing I'll say is the turnout was huge at the PUC hearing. It was well publicized by the local media. And I did interviews with both the local newspaper and radio stations. So that helped. And the PUC, you can bet, reads the paper and the news. So last thing I'll say is words of encouragement. You know, if you're feeling nervous, get support from an organization or people who've done a lot of lobbying or testifying. Meet with a group of people who have a lot of experience, especially if they have experience with the PUC or legislators or members of Congress or whomever you'll be meeting with. And know that as a group, you're much more powerful than alone. So I'll stop there and we'll just go to questions, I guess.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lisa. That was really beneficial for me, at least, to hear. And there's a few things that Lisa said that I want to underscore. One of the things being, you know, tailor this to kind of the local message, right? And what I took from that is, you know, that research piece that we're doing before we're going and meeting with legislators, making sure that we're learning about how they're voting and what is going to drive them, right? If this legislator is heavily influenced by what is going to make an economic impact, the best thing we can do as constituents, aside from, you know, having our personal story, is to bring in the ways that this is going to impact the local economy. And that's, you know, it's like speaking their language, right? While also being able to speak it from your experience and why it's important to you. Oh, I forgot my second point, but oh yes, okay. My second point is, you know, I think I maybe saw some like questions around, you know, does this really matter? And so I just want to remind everyone that these are elected officials. These are people who are elected by their constituents, by you, right? And so they have a vested interest in making sure that you all are happy, right? And if there are large quantities of constituents coming out to meet with them in person and talk about the issues that are important to them, that really signals to them these are people who are have the potential to go door knocking during you know, voting season. These are the people who are really going to take action and either kind of hurt or help my campaign. So yes, citizen lobbying does matter. Your voice matters, and I think Lisa is kind of the perfect example of that. So we've got a ton of questions that we're going to cover in the Q&A, but first I do have a quick poll that I would love for you all to take. And that should be launched on your screen. It's about 3 questions, so not very long. It would be wonderful if you all would just take a moment to go ahead and complete that. Meanwhile, I did see one question that I can kind of answer while you all are completing your poll, which is it really worth our time to meet with Mrs. or Mr. You know, elected official if their views don't align with our views? And, you know, my point is absolutely yes, right? That's kind of, again, I'll bring it back to that research piece. It's so important to know who it is that you're meeting with, because solar is a nonpartisan issue, right? Solar benefits everybody, and you can find talking points on solar that can speak to someone with any kind of voting record, right? Whether it's energy freedom, whether it's the economic benefits, whether it's energy resiliency, or, you know, if you have a climate narrative or you have a money saving narrative, whatever it is, there are pro solar talking points for that. So I just want to let you all know, it is absolutely worth your time. And in fact, I would say it might even be, you know, more worth your time to meet with people who have an opposing view from you, right? Just to make sure that, you know, they're hearing from outside of the echo chamber. So if you all have questions and you need support with gathering those, you know, pro solar talking points, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at Sun. We're going to go ahead and put that link in the chat, or that email address in the chat one more time, so that you can always have access to us if you wanted to get some of those talking points before your meeting. I see now that most people have taken the poll, so I'm going to go ahead and end it now. Thank you for taking that poll. And I think now we can kind of go ahead and get into some questions. So I think we can start with, will legislators really meet with individual constituents? And I've also got a few more members of my team here. I've got Roger and Aaron. So Roger, Aaron, Liz, whoever wants to grab this one, feel free to come off mute and share your perspective.
Sure, yeah. I'm happy to share. I have definitely set up meetings with legislators with just one person from the district. And it, you know, it's fine. I think they, you know, I mentioned this earlier, but I think you may need to be really persistent to set up a meeting. I definitely recently, to set up some meetings in Florida, I definitely had to email, you know, 2, 3, sometimes more than that times. So yeah, I would encourage you to reach out and be persistent. Anybody else want to add on?
No, I think, you know, this is, you know, you might not always get in a room with the legislator themselves, but, you know, even if you get a meeting with their staffer, that's also important. Their staffers do document this. They do kind of convey the nature of the meetings and the quantity of the meetings that they're getting. So even if you're not meeting with representative, whoever, if you're meeting with their staff, it's equally as powerful. Okay, next question. All right. What rebuttals do you have for the most common solar objections? So, you know, it is common maybe not to have a rebuttal in the meeting, but, you know, if an elected official is asking for more clarification, it might be that you do need to come prepared with some of these talking points. So I don't know if our policy team has any thoughts on what some common answers to rebuttals might be, but I thought that was a good question we could answer.
I mean, I think it depends sort of on like what the anti-solar specifics are. I mean, and I think, you know, there was maybe, yeah, and you answered this earlier about like, is it worth meeting with people that are like far to the right? I mean, you know, solar should be bipartisan, and we definitely have seen support from people across the aisle. You know, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's important to understand where they're coming from and like what these, you know, people are saying in their campaigns, what commitments are they making, what kind of messages are they using, and sort of try to use that in your framing of solar. But I think there's often a way to get, you know, to get through that. Yeah, I mean, and sometimes, right, it's like that book, Don't Think of an Elephant, right? Like maybe it's not helpful to bring up in your meeting that like, oh yeah, I really want to bust this myth that like solar panels are toxic. Like maybe it's better to just talk about like positive solar stories and like how much money solar is saving your family or your business, and like not get into the details of some of the like myths about solar. So I guess I would say that too.
Yeah, Lisa, please. Thank you, Liz.
One myth that I've heard about solar and that the local utilities here have promoted in the past is that, you know, it's the rich customers who have the solar and the poor, you know, and everybody else is subsidizing that. And there are at least 10 arguments against that. my neighbors get my extra energy. And I'm really actually, if you look at the economics of it, I'm preventing or helping Idaho Power not have to generate, energy from far away and bring that energy in and suffer the losses. And I'm providing additional capability, during peak times, et cetera. So there are a whole bunch of arguments, but that's a really common one. This idea that somehow solar owners are the elite and and other people are subsidizing us, and that's absolutely not true. And there are a lot of arguments that I think that's a good one to come prepared for, at least in this area.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a well-informed answer, Lisa, and couldn't agree more. What ways is solar impacting the utilities on a broader scale other than just one person generating their own power? So great point. I did see one question in the chat that Roger has already answered, but I thought that this one might be a little bit helpful for folks in the audience. So the question from James is, when we meet with our representatives, is it better to limit those at the meeting to constituents, or can others such as Sun or other organizations join as well? And what would the ideal number of people be? So I'm going to read Roger's response, but then I'm also going to kind of add my 2 cents as well. So it is most powerful for constituents to engage directly with their elected officials, but it can certainly be helpful to have staff support from Sun or other organizations present. May be helpful for your team to have clarity on who will lead the interaction and who may handle specific questions, et cetera. So yeah, just to piggyback kind of on what Roger said, you are the people who are, who have the power to see it to it that these people are going to be reelected or not, right? So they, especially want to hear from you. But again, I think this is where if not having support from an organization to back you up or to answer questions, if that kind of makes you feel too nervous to meet with a legislator on your own, then absolutely invite a member from an organization to join you, because I think really what's most important is getting you there and getting you in front of the elected official. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and plug, that's where that kind of pre-homework comes in of, making sure that you're kind of doing your research and figuring out what your talking points are and getting support from the organizations that are aligned with the cause that you are there to talk about. And that should make you feel really geared up and ready to go so that you can go into that meeting and speak confidently. Let's see. Is there any questions in here that anyone else from the advocacy team wanted to call out? Because I can definitely keep picking them out, but I don't want to be dominating the Q&A here. All right, so I do have a question from Lisa. Lisa got an email from their representative telling her that he wasn't running for re-election, so should she wait? She's in South Carolina. Added context, the representative is on the Energy Committee. I'm gonna ask if our policy team can answer that one.
Oh, I guess I could answer that. I mean, I guess it may depend on the office and when the election and stuff is held, but I think, if they're in office through the end of this year or for the next few months, you can definitely reach out and try to schedule a meeting. I mean, I guess one thing to know is that like during their, if they're a state legislator and you have a short legislative session, like some states that only lasts a couple months, things may be super busy during the session. And if you're not talking to them about a specific bill or something that session, it may be, if you just wanted to like build a relationship, that would probably be better done like before the legislative session started. But yeah, I think generally reaching out anytime is good. And I think, ideally you would build a relationship with someone who you could like work with beyond that, but you know, the staffers for that person you may connect with, and then they may move on to work for another legislator. So it can still be valuable, you know, in a lot of different ways, to meet with them, even if they're not going to be there that long.
I would just add that if this person's on the energy committee and they may be making decisions about energy regarding rooftop solar, it seems worth at least getting, you know, your thoughts to them. That seems important.
Absolutely. All right. So a lot of these are getting a little bit more like issue-based, a little bit more specific, but I think we can at least address some of these broader ones. How do we support low-income potential users?
Yeah, that seems like a question more like not really related to lobbying, but like how do we help more people access solar, which is definitely something that's really important to Solar United Neighbors. I would say, you know, we were involved in multiple Solar for All proposals, which was a program that was part of the Inflation Reduction Act. And we will find out if we won any of those proposals in a few months, I think. But that would be tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to help low to moderate income folks access solar savings. So we're really excited about that. Florida was probably the biggest all-in proposal that we worked on, but there were a bunch of others across the country, and I think there's a lot of potential there. We also have worked on, I think, dozens of pilots to help increase access to rooftop solar for low to moderate income folks. The policy team also, you know, this is an important policy priority. And so in our work on community solar, we think about advocating for carve-outs to ensure low income access to community solar and those solar savings on people's energy bills. I don't know if others want to add on to that.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think, you know, Liz just kind of highlighted something that is, you know, the whole reason why we're here today. You know, to support low-income communities having access to solar, we need to make sure decision makers know solar matters, and we need to make sure that they know that there are people who are watching how they're voting, and making sure that they feel that kind of incentive to protect pro-solar policy and make sure that they are supporting policies that are going to make solar more accessible to a broader scope of people. And we're kind of coming up on almost the end of the webinar here. So I'm just going to take one more question, and then I'm going to, you know, kind of wrap up. So Deanna asked, utilities have deep pockets for media blitzes and messaging. What are the best accurate sources that the average citizen can access to educate ourselves so we are most knowledgeable before setting up a meeting? So I went ahead and I put a few resources that Liz listed in the chat. But if you go to solarunitedneighbors.com, and on the top bar, there's a Learn the Issues bar. And in that, there's pretty much everything you can imagine regarding solar, whether that be net metering, HOAs, community solar, cost shift, whatever it may be, you can learn there. And then if your questions still aren't answered, you can always, like I said, email our team, and a member of our team can help you. But, you know, kind of in the broader scope of lobbying, I would say, you know, who are the people who are the experts in what you want to talk about? So maybe there's another organization that you're really passionate about. Maybe you're a farmer and you want to talk about, you know, protecting the Rural Energy for America program. You know, what information can Sun give you about that? And what information can your, like, other resources in the farming community tell you about what they're experiencing? Like, how can you find the experts that know, or people with the lived experience, and take what they have to say and then bring it into your meeting? So whether you're involved with another organization that's outside of Sun, or whether it's just Sun, it's always kind of best to tap into, you know, the experts of the field. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, we are going to send out a recording and a copy of the slides. We are also going to send out a sample email to invite legislators to a meeting. So if you're a little nervous about inviting a legislator to a meeting, we got you covered. There's a sample email. You'll just need to kind of fill in your information and you can utilize that. We will be sending out our comprehensive lobbying guide in the follow-up. If you are interested in becoming more engaged in solar and you want to be more involved in the solar movement, I do encourage you all to sign up to get involved with us. That way you can receive alerts to volunteer opportunities in your area. We definitely work on campaigns across the nation, so there are going to be many ways for folks to kind of make their voices heard in the future. And then if you want to take action on something now, you can join the movement to stop utility corruption. I'm going to go ahead and put our utility accountability action alert in the chat here. You guys can read more about it and you can sign the action alert on that page. And then lastly, I think I've plugged this resource several times now, but if you do have questions, please email advocacy@solarunitedneighbors.org. A member of our team will get back to you to answer those. I also want to say, if we missed your question tonight, I want to apologize for that. I tried to select questions that were relevant to lobbying and kind of just the overall training. But if you all did have kind of a more in-depth question that was about your personal experience or something that you are wanting to pursue personally, like I said, please do reach out to our team. And then I guess I'll finish with, thank you all so much. I know that you all took time out of your evening today. Maybe you skipped dinner with your family to be here today. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us. And thank you to Lisa, our amazing volunteer in Idaho. I really appreciate you sharing your story and, all the work that you've done to support solar in your community and across the nation. So I guess I guess that's it.